All right, gang, I am incredibly excited about this interview. 9 years, maybe 9.5 years in the making. One of the individuals in the retail auto industry that I look up to, that I consider a distant mentor because I've consumed so much of his content. He's an author, keynote speaker, digital marketing entrepreneur, marketing contrarian, and also an advocate, one of the biggest brightest advocates of the dealer body that I have ever witnessed in my career in automotive, going on 22 years.
Come on.
Mr. Brian Pasch, welcome to the Dealer Playbook podcast.
Thank you for the invite, and I'm so proud of your recent milestone and, well, how long you've been doing this and how many people enjoy the content. So congrats.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you, sir. We're on the heels of DMSC, your Digital Marketing Strategies Conference. I was blown away, not just by the number of dealers in this room, but I've been pretty open about this. I think I was about a day and a half into the conference listening to you, your brother Glenn, the other subject matter leaders, and I text my CEO, or my CTO rather, and I say, I don't think I know anything about the car business. You know, and that is, for me, I've become comfortably uncomfortable with that position, or uncomfortably comfortable, however you want to phrase that, because I love that there is so much to know, so much to learn. More importantly, what really impressed me from your event is that it was so welcoming at the same time. There wasn't a hint of, oh, you didn't know that. It was very much like, hey, welcome in. You know, which I think, I don't know how you do it, but that seems like a really tough line to straddle. Like, oh, you didn't know versus, hey, welcome in.
Yeah, listen, as a student of the industry, you know as well as I do that things are changing very rapidly. And even some of the new acronyms, I remember when someone first said GLB, and it was only a few months ago before I learned about this Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, the GLBA, and the implications on dealers. 6 months ago, I wouldn't be able to talk about that. So things are changing quickly. At our conferences, we just embrace people who want to learn and who are transparent. And so you'll notice that even in the Q&A, people aren't afraid to ask tough questions. People aren't afraid to hold people accountable. We welcome that spirit. And then it just brings credibility to the investment that people make to come out of the dealership, that they're getting something of value and not just something retread from, an ADA deck or another conference deck.
Sure. What I was really impressed by, to your point, is dealers, you and I have been to a lot of conferences. I remember we must have been at I don't know if you were there or not, but I know one of the vendors had sponsored a nightclub. The energy was pumping. I'm Italian, so I'm feeling the rhythm. And I remember the dancers on the stage. There was a live band, live music. The music's building. And the dealer and the dancer on stage says, all right, everybody, on the count of 3, we're gonna jump. And show 3, 2, 1. And the music erupts. And here we go. And a lot of the dealers are just staring. So the fact that you were able to get participation, not just participation, but really what I thought valuable is being able to understand their point of view, and that they're not afraid in this environment to share their point of view and say, hey, yes, I see where you're looking at it from, but here's where I'm looking at it from. Let's come to a consensus and let's try and understand and poke and prod this. That leads me a little bit to the article that you published this morning. I'd love to pick your brain a little bit on that before we move to the GA4 topic.
Sure.
Dealers and vendors, I think alike at DMSC, made some really interesting discoveries about what type of experience consumers are looking for at the dealership level. Can you share some of what stood out to you from that?
Sure. A to Z Sync, who's I would say a connected retailing provider, hired I think they're called YouGov. That's a survey tool. And they really dug in and asked the right questions. I think CSI scores hide the fact that most consumers are not happy with the overall sales experience. And so no surprise, really respect the time they did online, have a consistent experience online and in store, and save them time, right? So what the feedback from digital retailing discussions at DMSC were something like this. Digital retailing, as we know it now, isn't working. Many dealers are using it as a lead capture tool, and then just following their old sales process. OEMs like Stellantis are forcing a digital retailing tool on dealer website that they don't even like, that has half the performance of existing solutions that they're already using, and yet this is supposed to help the consumer experience. The more and more I thought about it, I had a great conversation with Chip Perry, and he pulled me over and he said, Brian, I got an idea. Maybe we're trying to change too much all at once. You know, their platform is focused on one person selling. He said, we may be forcing dealers, even in our own model, to go too far. And I said, well, what are you thinking? He says, we need a bridge to get dealers from where they are today into a forward movement that's closer to what consumers want. And I said, well, what do you think that is? And he says, I think the core is making sure that whatever is presented online is picked up at the store. And he says, we need to connect the online and in-store experience. I thought more and more about it. And I'm like, isn't that what we're doing? And then it hit me, just like you said, the more I think about it, the less we know. I'm going through some new client group consulting projects where, okay, this is the digital retailing tool and we're using VIN desking. And I'm like, why are we using VIN desking? Because that's not the tool that's on. Well, that's what the store managers want. I said, well, you know, it's a completely different interface experience, different calc engine. Yeah, but that's what they want. And it hit me that if we're going to transform the retail experience, Jim Farley, and we'll talk about that letter later, has a vision that consumers are going to buy 100% of their EV vehicles online without a dealer, which is fantasy. But I understand what he's trying to get at is that, hey, consumers just want to know the affordability of their vehicle, you know, what their trade is worth. And so I thought about it as like, maybe the next step is to challenge the industry. Instead of going to digital retailing, which implies like 100% of the sales are online, right, why don't we just try to create a connected retailing experience? Like you see something on Best Buy, it's priced a certain way. When you walk into the store, the price isn't changed. It's the same price. So that was the article that I was inspired from, because if we look at the success of OEM managed digital retailing programs, they have not succeeded after 5 years to really transform the retail sales experience.
I love how you draw attention as well to the culture piece. We've been rewarding the output of these programs with co-op dollars, but not so much the internal processes that are needed to support them. How do you think that would look? And do you think OEMs are even interested in supporting training and things of that nature?
Listen, and I've used Toyota as an example, but it's because Glenn Rizzo is also a Floridian. SET is an amazing distributor in Florida, and his team, his SmartPath team, spends a tremendous amount of time in the dealership training and accountability and developing processes. What I do see is people sign up for a digital retailing tool that the OEM sponsors. It comes with, you know, a week of training or 3 days of training,
right,
or 2 days of remote training, and the OEM checks the box like, man, we got digital retailing tool. And I'm saying, hold on, we're talking about to really use these tools to have a connected retailing experience. We got to say, not just what's on the website, but what's the handoff, what's the experience. And so in this article, I suggest to OEMs, why wouldn't they co-op digital retailing training? We could be calling it connected retailing training. Great folks like, you know, we have a training company, but, you know, David Kane, who, you know, is an industry leader. There's Jennifer Suzuki,
right,
there are people who are passionate about helping dealers transform, but if the OEMs really wanted to achieve that wow experience, this future state that is superior to what Tesla's offering, they're going to have to significantly shift from technology, widget, gadget focus to defining what a modern sales process looks like and funding that transformation.
One of the things that has always just impressed me about yours and certainly your brother Glenn, who I've gotten to know quite well over the years, approach to not just the industry, but just current events at large, is that you lean into the facts and then support with education, where I think the industry at large tends to just focus on the fear. And that never has resonated with me, the fear mongering and the tactics to sell that way. And you've always been a tremendous example of, no, let's look at the facts. Here's what it is, and here's what we can do about it. And that's something that's always so impressive. So I just want to thank you for that, because we need more of that in this industry. And you certainly address the river of fears in your article. But I love that the thought process needs to be about people. And I think about, well, gosh, I think about Mary Barra's keynote at CES, or where was she? What was this? They were announcing the Silverado EV.
Right.
I pay very close attention to people's choice of words. And one word that stood out to, or one phrase that she said that stood out to me is, as she was announcing the Silverado EV, she said, through our preferred network of dealers today. And I thought, and I went on LinkedIn and I went on social, Brian, and all the GM dealers are like, this is fantastic, the Silverado EV. And I'm like, but she said today, preferred network of dealers today. What does she mean by today? And now all of a sudden we see Jim Farley, CEO of Ford's comments and your open letter to him. What are you seeing? Where are they trying to pivot? You mentioned earlier in our conversation that you understand what he's trying to get at, but what's your take?
Sure. So I think that GM and Ford dealers have been relatively quiet about some of these bombshells. Both GM and Ford announced that EV models will be sold direct to consumer on a national portal. That is true. And Techion looks like it could be powering both of those, portals.
Mm-hmm.
No details on how trades would be handled. No details on how F&I products would be handled. Okay. So GM has been relatively quiet, right? They've been working on Car Bravo and their EV through Techion DRP.
Right.
I think Jim Farley was probably the most transparent and says, look, it's inefficient. We want to go direct. We want to be more like Tesla. We want those margins. We want the customers to be happy. And I understand from a stock perspective, from an investor community, he would eventually love to split off Ford EV as a separate company, get Tesla's valuation, make the investors happy, make him very rich. Yet he is disconnected from the facts of how consumers want to buy. And yesterday, I was on a panel with Brian Benstock, and he has a transparent sales process that can get people done with their whole transaction in under 45 minutes, even deliver the car to the consumer. They don't have to come in the dealership. Less than 15% choose that option. The vast majority want to come in. This is very common, even in, let's just say, the shop organization that I visited. They're one price, one point of contact. They can get people in and out in an hour. And their brand promises one price, one person, 1 hour. Even that, 90% of the people still want to come in. So how do we get from 10% who want to transact completely online with remote delivery and Jim Farley's? Well, the truth is, I don't think he's that naive. I think that the laws in the US allow different rules for EV. And I think it's the slow boil. Let's get dealers comfortable that only 1% or 2% of their sales are EV. Let's get them comfortable with a consumer direct model. Let them go kicking and screaming. But I think it's the end around that over time, if dealers aren't careful, then the consumer direct model covered by Tesla's breakthrough. No one thought that Tesla would be successful, but Tesla brought in a whole new code of legal rules and regulations that would allow a manufacturer to effectively sidestep franchise laws. Now, instead of getting dealers all riled up with class action lawsuits that only will make the lawyers wealthy,
Right.
and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be some legal action. I think that we need to get to the table, and that's why I asked Jim Farley 10 questions. I've been getting great feedback that those were 10 appropriate, non-emotional, factual, as you mentioned, questions that can help dealers prepare. And whether Jim responds or not, I don't know, but I hope he will, because I've received hundreds of private messages from dealers saying, I hope Jim responds.
I hope he does. I would love to see an interview with you and Jim in a similar fashion to this, maybe in person. I think that would be very compelling. And I think, you know what? This would be a perfect opportunity for the OEMs to show they're not disconnected, that they are actually connected. And how are they factoring the dealer community, their network of preferred partners today? How are they factoring that in? But I like how you draw attention to I guess the long game of it. It's the frog in a lukewarm pool of water, and it's slowly gonna, the heat's slowly gonna rise. Do you think, I've thought about this before, but do you think at the turn of the century, when we went from horse and carriage to automobile, do you think they had to deal with even remotely the same amount of things that we seem to be dealing with? We came out of a pandemic, then a chip shortage and inventory, and now new car dealers are used car dealers, and now all of a sudden a looming recession. Do you think maybe in 100 years they'll look back at our age and say, no, they might have been the best business people on the planet that we've ever seen?
Well, listen, I'm an advocate for dealers because I've met some of the most impressive entrepreneurs who've reinvented themselves many times. When critics of the auto industry say dealers are stuck in the past, okay, there are some that demonstrate behavior that hasn't changed. But the vast majority of dealers, and I mean that, the vast majority are working hard to evaluate market conditions, pivot. When the pandemic came, people were doing more deals online, embracing video conferencing, remote delivery, pickup for sales and service. This was never really pushed before. And some of that has stuck. I think that, again, I'm going to reference my conversation with Brian Benstock yesterday, made some amazing points that EV vehicles are not, as they are now, environmentally friendly. The amount of land and raw materials needed just for a single battery, he used the statistic that 1 acre of earth has to be mined to get the rare earth elements just to create one battery.
Wow.
Now, if you have 14 million batteries that need to be produced, how are we charging cars with coal or oil burning generation? So are we fooling ourselves, number one? So there could be some pretty serious pushback at some point. And then the infrastructure to support 14 million EV vehicles doesn't exist today and probably won't exist for 10 years. So his comment was, calm down. We're still going to be around next year, and we're going to still be around 10 years from now. Now, I think what's worthy of the conversation is, how do dealers prepare? What can they do now to find a better middle ground with OEMs who need to be more cost efficient, need to satisfy their customers, to increase brand loyalty? Well, these are all great conversations, but EVs taking over the world in the US with the expansiveness of our country, the lack of charging infrastructure, the improvements to the grid, just the natural resources. And he brought up another point, is like, guess who controls all the natural resources needed for batteries? And that's China. So, are we telling US consumers that the real story is that this is as dirty as ICE engines and will increase our dependency on China even more? We left being dependent on Saudi Arabian oil to be a domestic supplier of our own oil.
Right.
And now we're saying, get rid of oil and gas production, go to batteries. And now we're going to have a huge problem with dependency on China. I mean, these are real questions that I don't think are being surfaced. I don't think they're being discussed. And so what's happening is the dealers, in a sense, being seen as a gas guzzling dinosaur selling cars the old fashioned way. And everyone hates that. Let's get rid of dealers. And under no future reality is that going to change anytime soon.
I'm fascinated, coming from Alberta, Canada, which, I mean, the oil sands are there, to hear the difference in perspective. I was having a conversation with an individual in the oil and gas sector, and he said, well, look, if there was an oil tanker in the ocean and it started leaking oil, we would rush to go and clean up that oil spill like as fast as we possibly can. Well, the way I see it is we have a massive oil spill in the dirt, and we are there going to clean it up, and we're doing it ethically, and we're doing it cleaner than any other area in the world. Yet for some reason, we're shutting down or decreasing our export and then purchasing all of that oil that's not ethically or cleanly produced from other countries. Gas prices are going up, and now, of course, they're saying go buy electric vehicles. To your point, one can't help but wonder, Brian, well, what's the actual agenda here? And is it bigger and deeper than any of us probably even want to admit?
Listen, there's something cool about an EV vehicle. Okay. There's something psychologically, I think, therapeutic, that you don't go to that nasty, dirty gas station and support,
Right.
dirty oil. Okay. But where's our energy coming? Now in Florida, they have to have nuclear, which I'm an advocate for. But, Germany shut down a lot of its nuclear power plants, infrastructure, and now regretting it. So I think that there has to be a more balanced approach. Give consumers choice. I don't think ICE vehicles are going away, even though there's some mandates in place. But I think as we learn a little bit more of the challenges that consumers face with the lack of EV infrastructure, the cost of EV raw materials, the dependency on the supply chain, we may, come to the realization that 100% EV world, like California's mandating and others, basically means we are 100% putting our travel and transportation infrastructure into China's hands.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a different president, if you had a different mindset, if China attacks Taiwan, well, talk about chip problems, So I think part of this whole conversation, which tactically is affecting dealers,
Right.
demands a much more thoughtful conversation on our rush to EV and who will be holding the cards of our transportation future.
It's so interesting. It's compelling. It's the late night reading that my wife doesn't understand why I find so interesting. Now, quick side note. Did I hear this right, that you have a background in, is it physics?
Yeah. I went to Rutgers University in New Brunswick and graduated with a degree in physics.
And does that have any sort of loose parallel into your support of nuclear, or is it just is it the inner nerd in you?
No, not really. I love the classical physics, and the nuclear physics piece was a little out there for me. I liked astrophysics. I thought that was cool.
Okay.
Space, stars.
Uh-huh.
But what I like about, the idea of nuclear is that It's providing a source of energy that's not just moving the burning of coal or oil down the street so people can't see it,
Right.
And I think that in a future state, maybe someone said, oh, we should have waited for solid state batteries, not, the battery infrastructure. And maybe we'll have another revolution that solid state batteries will work, or and other people are, is it I don't know if is it a nitrogen car or,
Right.
fuel cell. And so, I think that the current cars that we're talking about with the batteries and the limited supply and the reliance on China, eventually is going to become a bigger issue that will push innovation for different power cell technologies. But right now, if it's charging that's going to do it, not a nitrogen or some other, if it's charging infrastructure, we're talking about seeing 100% of consumers riding around in EV vehicles like Holland and others have kind of mandated, seems like far-fetched.
Well, and Captain Kirk still drove old 1960s classic cars. So I'm just, you know,
Right. I mean, come on.
so okay. Now you said something earlier, and I think this is really intriguing. You've made a couple of points that I want to just use to tie into our next piece of conversation here. In speaking about Jim Farley, in truly understanding, and also DMSE, truly understanding how consumers want to purchase, not just today, but being able to track that trend into the future. That's going to be a really integral piece. And then, of course, just how innovation is evolving quite rapidly. It's going to be very important for us as business owners, marketers, to understand how the market is moving. And I want to kind of position that way to lead into this. I think the word is undertaking
Yeah.
for your Google Analytics for Council, your GA4 Council. Maybe tell us, for those that are listening that may not be incredibly familiar with analytics as it exists today and what the difference might be for GA4, maybe let's start there. I'd love your perspective on that, especially knowing that you've been huge in the education space for dealers in Google Analytics. What's the difference there? What can we expect in GA4? And then maybe let's talk a little bit about the council that you've initiated.
Sure. For the non-technical store managers listening to the podcast, think of analytics in general. Google Analytics is the uplog to your virtual showroom, your website. Just like you tracked appointments, shows, sold, demos, burning gas in a logbook at one point, analytics records how many people visited your website, what they did, what pages they viewed, what actions they clicked on. Next July 23rd, the Universal Analytics, the current, if you want to call it version 3 of analytics, will stop collecting data. And Google Analytics 4 will be the only platform that is collecting that uplog data from your website. Now, dealers will still be able to access their old Google Analytics data from a period of time. We don't know how long quite yet. And they need to get Google Analytics 4 set up properly now. The problem is, in the current version of analytics, every website company has set up analytics differently to record the events or actions that consumers take. Every chat company has their own framework, every digital retailing. And I started to do some sniffing around. And what I found is everyone's currently working on how they're going to implement GA4. And it came up, it was like, wouldn't it save a tremendous amount of money and support costs on website companies, chat companies, digital retailing companies, marketing companies? Wouldn't it be amazing if all website platforms that are popular in automotive threw the same click action names into analytics? So when someone clicks on a photo or clicks on a CTA button or downloads a Carfax, the event name, like Carfax click or whatever, is the same on dealer.com, Dealer Inspired, Dealer eProcess, and such. And so I thought more about it, and then I did some research in GA4, and it's so much richer in what can be shared. So I started making phone calls, And I said, would you be interested in participating in a standards process? And they're like, Brian, we're going through GA4 right now and we're trying to figure out how to do it. And I'm like, would you join? Yes, 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 yes. So I decided to create the Automotive Standards Council for GA4. And we have marketing agencies, website companies, digital retailing companies, marketing automation, merchandising companies, all joining. We're going to start meeting in work groups, websites as a work group, digital retailing as a work group, communication chat tools. You get the idea. And the idea is to agree on the names of the consumer events. Everything in GA4 is about events. What did the consumer do? So Google has a standard set of events. They call them recommended events, already built in. And following Google's lead, we're going to have recommended events for automotive websites, recommended events for digital retailing and such. The good news is we're not asking any of the companies to rewrite their code. It's just when someone clicks on a button on a dealer.com website or dealer on website or a DEP website, they're all going to call that button click something different. And what we're saying is, look, when you send it in the GA, use this name. And so far, what's involved looks very manageable without a lot of cost. No one's really developed reports from the marketing industry on GA4. So, man, if we get everyone together, it's going to make dealer group data management so much easier, marketing agency performance management so much easier. So we're really excited. And on the week of June 13th, we'll be firming up the committee assignments. And then the following week, we'll start Zoom calls to kick off the planning. Our goal is to present the first public published standard in November at the Modern Retailing Conference in Palm Beach.
This is amazing. And allow me to just say, I don't think anybody else could pull this off.
Yeah, it's Gray Scott, who's the marketing director at dealer group Cardinale on the West Coast. He said, you're like suicidal. Like, why would you do this? He said, you know how difficult it is to get people to cooperate? And I said, yeah. But the truth is, there are a number of large dealer groups joining the council, and we have influence over the vendor community equally as I do, because they can vote with their dollars. They can tell Dealeron, hey, we want all our websites conforming to the standard. And Dealeron, if a dealer group has 100 websites with them, guess what they're going to do? They're going to say, yes, sir. Right. So since no website company, marketing agency, DR tool has completely finished any GA4 planning, and the tool's evolving every week, every month. Google's servicing new features and capabilities. This is the perfect time to do it.
This is amazing. And, there's another thing I've been thinking about. I'm sure you've thought about this. We were talking earlier about the number of conferences and panels we've sat on over the years. You're doing something here that's never been done as kind of I'm not going to say it's an ulterior motive. I think it's an ulterior happy side effect, which is you've now caused people who inherent in their roles in their different companies need to have some measure of disagreement with each other to separate themselves. You've put us all into a room and you've said, let's come to a consensus. And I'm just picturing panels in the future, Brian, where somebody's going to ask a question about GA4 and we're all going to look at each other and say, yeah, we agree.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be funny because, listen, people misunderstood what's involved. Like I said, without being technical, when you build a website, there's something called the data layer, and every programmer has their own preferences on naming conventions to what a photo gallery click is. And someone might call it gallery _ click, and another might be photo _ gallery _ click, whatever. That's human nature. Creativity is creativity. But what we're saying is, since GA4 is new, when you send that click action, that event into GA4, let's agree on a standard name. And there's no emotion in that. There's no like bravado, like my naming convention is better than yours. No, like, hey, let's just agree. And you'll see what Google's done in the recommended events is that they're all named in lowercase. They all have underscores, not dashes between words. There's some common sense, and they're easy to understand what the events are. It's not like BX12 event. What's the BX12 event? I don't know. That was what the programmer wanted it. That's the crap that dealers have been dealing with. And so if we just agree, let's have a transparent naming convention. Let's have a compliant naming convention that we all can use, and no ego involved in the naming because it adds no value. Then let your website technology be the determining factor of which platform is chosen, but don't get hung up on what you call the clicks. And once people heard that, they're like, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Right.
You're not telling us how to program. And then we'll define what a conversion is. And we're going to have soft conversions and hard conversions. And a conversion in GA4 is an event. So if there's an event that says lead form submitted, which is a common name, like lead underscore form underscore submitted, or service underscore appointment, confirmed, whatever.
Right.
Okay, we're going to say these type of events are conversions or hard conversion because the consumer gave information. And if somebody like played around with a trade tool without giving their information, we might say, well, that's a really engaged shopper. Let's call that a soft conversion. And so instead of looking at a marketing report that says you got 783 conversions and you go in your CRM and you see you have 50 email leads, you're like, what if they call them a conversion then? Because, I got 100 phone calls and 50 lead forms. There's like 600 conversions I'm missing. And then, well, a conversion is a visit to an EDP. It's like, says who?
Right.
So this is some of the craziness, like that we deal with at marketing agencies, trying to understand other agency reports. So as long as we just agree, like this is what a hard conversion is, and this is soft conversion, and everything else is just an engagement event, I think the industry will benefit.
Yeah, I think this is tremendous. So kudos to you for spearheading this, for putting yourself on the line to both, yes, get praise, but also get a ton of heat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People like, oh, why are you doing this? To make a lot of money? And I'm like, listen, I'm going to be herding cats for an entire year. So good luck. You want that? If you want that job, you should have raised your hand a lot earlier. But you also said I'm in a unique position. After 17 years, people know that I'm fair. People know that I promote good products. People know that I try to find a middle ground to help agencies and dealers align. So I think after 17 years of education and doing Google Analytics workshops and writing books on Google Analytics, people know that, look, Google Analytics is not the secret sauce. It's just a reporting tool. Let's just agree this time around with a fresh start to do it right.
Yeah, this is tremendous. Brian, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast today. How can those listening or watching get in touch with you and learn more about what you have on the go?
Great. Yeah. Just brianpasch.com is the website. If any of the vendors who sit on websites or provide tools on websites want to join the council, it's just brianpasch.com/GA4. That's the number 4. Very simple. And then look forward to seeing many of your listeners at the Modern Retailing Conference in Palm Beach, November 13, 14, 15. And that website is very simply modernretailingconference.com. Make it simple and people will come.
Brian, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Mike.